Hey lovely, and welcome back to Crime Analyst and the Intelligence Cell. And this week I want to talk about the OJ Simpson of it all. But more importantly, who I want to centre are the victims, Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman, because they deserve to be centred and remembered. And I want to get into what happened in the case, but also some other victims who've come to light. And you may not have heard about that, so I'm going to share that with you in this video and so much more. But before I get into it, I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you who've subscribed to Crime Analyst YouTube. Thank you for your super thanks. It's amazing that you send me money. I really can't thank you enough. Please continue. I've got nothing against that, and you know, it's a really nice thing to do. Actually, it makes me feel very valued and reassured and in making this content, and it all helps because it costs money. It's my time and production time, etc., and I do all the editing myself, so that's wonderful. And also just to let you know that I've launched the Crime Analyst Squad on Patreon, so I'm very excited about my new community that we are building together. I always said I want to grow the squad, and what you get is, well, you can support my work, but you also get ad-free early release episodes, so you get them on the weekend for the podcast. You get extended interviews, bonus content, bonus videos, unfiltered, my unfiltered 2 cents, community chat. We can talk and engage much deeper in an environment that is safe, as well as my monthly happy hours where we can talk with each other as well. I know many of you want to have that deeper engagement, and you'll get my curated list of what I'm watching, what I'm listening to. And I know that the true crime, there's a saturation of true crime content, so it's always helpful if you just get that hour. You don't want to have to flick through a million shows on Netflix, and certainly with podcasts there are so many now, so I cut through the noise. And all you have to do is go to patreon.com/crime analyst, and you can join for free as well, and then you can decide if you want to upgrade. And there's already a lot of material waiting for you, so go over to Patreon once you've watched this video. Okay, so why is this case important? Why is it important to revisit Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman? Well, on April the 10th, we learned that OJ Simpson died from cancer at age 76. And straight away, as soon as I got the message, I saw that there were a lot of outlets memorialising him. And the way that he is being remembered by the media versus the people whose lives he's actually touched is stark. There was Fox News, NPR, Reuters, Variety, New York Times, so many, all were sure to mention OJ Simpson's achievements, his football career and his acting. And that's what they centred. And they spoke of him as a legend. But that is not his legacy. What we'll remember him for, and what Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman's family will remember him for, is the terror and abuse he subjected Nicole to for years, and how he brutally murdered 2 bright, happy, loving and kind people on June the 12th, 1994. Now, I did post about this, and I said that was his legacy. And it was interesting because some people highlighted to me that OJ Simpson was acquitted of their murders in a high-profile criminal trial. And that did happen. That happened in 1995, and it was controversial at the time. And some of you will remember it. And he had many lawyers, a whole team. Some called them the Dream Team, others called them the Scheme Team. Tomato, tomato. I mean, for me, they're the Scheme Team. They were led by Johnny Cochran, and along with Robert Shapiro and Robert Kardashian and F. Lee Bailey, Alan Dershowitz, they outnumbered and they outstrategized the prosecution. And they also had Dr. Henry Lee working for them, who's a colleague of mine. He is incredibly, he's impressive. He's world-renowned as an expert and criminalist. And what that term criminalist means is that he's an expert in multiple things. He's an expert forensic scientist, he's an expert crime scene constructionist, blood spatter analyst, and much more, an expert on behaviour as well. And Dr. Lee found every mistake that the LAPD made. And there were many mistakes, and they were all played out at the trial. And there were also many other twists and turns in the case, which I've detailed in an extra bonus episode that will go on the Crime Analyst Patreon. So that will drop there. So if you're interested in the case and you want to get into some of the details, more the minutiae about the case, the devil's always in the detail, then do go over to Patreon and patreon.com/crime analyst. So 2 years after OJ Simpson was acquitted in the criminal trial, a civil court jury found him liable for the deaths of his ex-wife Nicole and Ron Goldman. And that is his legacy. He was ordered to pay the families, Nicole and Ron's, $33.5 million. But OJ Simpson did everything in his power to avoid paying any of the money to the Goldman family. And this was not a man who played by the rules or who did the right thing. And he even moved to Florida so that he could avoid paying any money. And Ron's father, Fred, has had to continuously pursue him through the civil courts, maintaining that that was the only way to get justice for his son. Now, more recently, OJ's executor of his will, Malcolm Laverne, publicly stated that he would do everything that he can to ensure that the families would receive no money as per OJ Simpson's wish. My first question is, what sort of a lawyer does that? And I'm pretty confident that an attorney has to follow the law, and outstanding debts and creditors have to be paid first and foremost. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot more legal wrangling to come. But seriously, I mean, for me, the way the victims' families have been treated is absolutely reprehensible and egregious. And let us not forget that Nicole and Ron were brutally murdered. Now, this was one of the most brutal and bloody crime scenes. And I have seen the pictures, and that's why I say it through my own lens of having seen that Nicole was almost decapitated, and the amount of blood that was present. I mean, she was the primary target. There's no mistake about that. It was her property. She was found just down the stairs. She had a front entrance with some stairs going down. It was like a bit of a porch area, and there was some shrubbery. So it was a little bit hidden from the road, but she had come down the stairs, and the brutality of the murder, well, it really did shock a number of experts. And Dr. Werner Spitz, a renowned medical examiner and pathologist who sadly just passed away, may he rest in peace. He was a wonderful man and had a brilliant brain and mind, and he was one of my friends, and I've worked with him on a number of cases, and he truly was one of the world's greats and very good at what he did. Well, he looked at those photos. He actually testified at the civil trial, and the scheme team, the lawyers, OJ Simpson's lawyers, tried desperately to get him for the defence team, but he would not. After he'd seen the crime scene photos in particular, he opined it was overkill, and this was clearly a domestic homicide. And I would agree, absolutely. The crime scene picture painted, or the crime scene assessment, I should say, of how we analyse crime scenes, particularly the brutality towards Nicole, painted a picture of anger and rage and revenge and punishment. Someone who was very angry. And I believe that Ron was there, wrong time, wrong place. She had seen, Nicole had been in his restaurant earlier, she'd left her sunglasses there, and he'd gone round to drop them off. And I believe that he fought valiantly to protect and save Nicole. And sadly, he was overpowered, but he fought hard. And what we know is that Nicole had separated from OJ Simpson after years of abuse, and his coercive control and intimate partner terrorism was extensive. And they'd got together, actually, when you go back in time, which I'm always very interested in how people meet, well, they got together when she had just turned 18. So she was very young. She was out of college. She was a waitress in a Beverly Hills nightclub called Daisy at the time. And that's where she met OJ Simpson, who was 29 years old. So he was much older. So immediately, I think power imbalance just on age alone. He was married. So he was married to a lady called Marguerite. He had children, and he was at the top of his career, well, coming out the other side of his football career, but he set his sights on Nicole. And that power imbalance wasn't just in age, it was a professional power imbalance as well, in terms of achievements and in terms of life experience and in terms of strength, physical strength. And what's important is he did not look for an equal. But they had a whirlwind relationship, and she moved in with him after months of dating. And OJ Simpson became her world. So everything about his world and him became hers. And in other words, she hadn't lived her life. And she wanted children, and so did he. And she became a mother, and she adored her children. And she was an incredible mother. But OJ Simpson abused her throughout, not just the relationship, but throughout her pregnancies as well, telling her that she was fat and no fun anymore. And I want to read something to you. I'm going to read some extracts just from a letter that Nicole wrote to OJ Simpson. And this letter was introduced in the civil trial. And it's really instructive about what was going on in their relationship. And I give a full analysis of the whole letter. I detail and my analysis of it in the extra episode, the bonus episode for the Crime Analyst Squad on Patreon. So I'm just going to lift out some of the extracts here. But she starts off talking to OJ, basically saying, OJ, I think I have to put this all in a letter. A lot of years ago, I used to do much better in a letter. I'm going to try it again now. So, and she continues, but she gives a bit of context about how angry she is about what's been going on. And she said, I assume that your recurring nasty attitude and mean streak was to cover up your cheating and a general disrespect for women and a lack of manners. I wanted to be a wonderful wife. I believed that it would finally be me and you against the world. Let me say that again. She wrote it quite differently. I believed that it would finally be you and me against the world. And she put that in air quotes, that people would be envious or in awe of us because we stuck through it and finally became one real couple. I let my guard down. I thought it was finally going to be you and me. You wanted a baby, or so you said, she wrote in brackets, and I wanted a baby. Then with each pound you were terrible. You gave me dirty looks of disgust. You said mean things to me at times about my appearance and walked out on me and lied to me. I remember one day my mum said, he actually thinks you can have a baby and not get fat. And she put that in air quotes to denote it was a direct quote. I gained 10 to 15 pounds more than I should have with Sydney. Well, that's by the book. Most women gain twice that. It's not like it was that much, but you made me feel so ugly. I've battled 10 pounds up and down the scale since I was 15. It was no more extra weight than was normal for me to be up. I believe my mum. You thought a baby's weight, 7 pounds, and the woman should gain 7 pounds. I'd like to finally tell you that that's not the way it is. And had you read those books I got you on pregnancy, you may have known that. Talk about feeling alone. So in that, she talks about isolation. She talks about his mean streak, his disrespect of women. So it's not just to her. She talks about the fact that there were rules that she wasn't meant to put on extra weight, making her feel ugly, not supporting her in pregnancy when you're most vulnerable. The fact that he never read any of the books, so he didn't support her in the changes she was going through. And she continued, in between Sydney and Justin, you say my clothes bothered you, that my shoes were on the floor, that I bugged you. Wow, that's so terrible. Try I had a low self-esteem because since we got married, I felt like the paragraph above. There was also the time before Justin and after a few months, Sydney. I felt really good about how I got back into shape and we made out. But you beat the holy hell out of me and we lied at the X-ray lab and said I fell off a bike. Remember? Exclamation point, 2 question marks. Great for my self-esteem. So the things that she talks about that annoy him, like little micro things, but he makes them into big things. And the fact that he beat her so badly and she had to go and get an X-ray and she covered for him. She lied for him, which again increases isolation and pushes her closer to the perpetrator. She says, great for my self-esteem, i.e. her self-esteem was 0. And then came the pregnancy with Justin, and oh, how wonderful you treated me again. I remember swearing to God and myself that under no circumstance would I let you be in the delivery room. And since Justin's birth and the mad New Year's Eve beat up, and I don't see how our stories compare. I was so bad because I wore sweats and left shoes around and didn't keep a perfect house or comb my hair the way you liked it or have dinner ready at the precise moment you walked through the door, or that I just plain got on your nerves sometimes. I don't see how that compares to infidelity, wife beating and verbal abuse. I called the cops to save my life, whether you believe me or not. She's talking about another time when he beat her up. So she's making it clear there are a number of times where he beats her up. And she said she called because she was in fear for her life. But I didn't pursue anything after that. I didn't prosecute. I didn't call the press and I didn't make a big deal of it or a big charade, she says. I waited for it to die down and asked for it to. But I've never loved you since or been the same. She said after we got married, things changed. We couldn't have housefuls of people like we used to have for the barbecue because I had other responsibilities. I didn't want to go to a lot of events. I'd back down at last minute on functions and trips. I admit I'm sorry. And she said, I wanted so to be a good wife, but you never gave me the chance. So this is really instructive, the letter that she wrote to him, because it really gives us a sense of the coercive control, the rules and regulations, the intimate partner terrorism, how he treated her and how he did not value her. In fact, he did the opposite. He devalued her. And Nicole did try and get help. Yes, she did report the abuse to a domestic violence shelter and she called LAPD. And we're going to come to that in a minute. And she spoke to a DV shelter in Santa Monica just days before she was murdered. And in 1989, Nicole asked the police to arrest him. It was the 9th time that they had been called to their address. And OJ Simpson hospitalised Nicole and he said to the police, you've been out here 8 times before and now you're going to arrest me for this, ? And Nicole told investigating officers, he's going to kill me, he's going to kill me. And the officers said, Nicole repeatedly said, you never do anything about him, you talk to him and then you leave. So because there was a time where she had physical injuries, he put her in the hospital, they did put him before the court, they did arrest him, and he received 2 years probation, 200 hours community service and was ordered to pay less than $1,000 in fines, which is utterly outrageous. And he didn't comply with any of it because he was OJ Simpson. He was going to do what he wanted and when he wanted. And that talks to his entitlement. And I want you to listen to this 911 call from October the 25th, 1993. And trigger warning here because it is very distressing. I've used this call in training many times in domestic abuse, stalking and harassment and honor-based violence risk masterclass training because there's just so many moments in it. So I'm going to let you listen to this call and then I'm going to unpack some of it.
911 emergency.
Can you get someone over here now to 325 Gretna Green? He's back. Please.
Okay, what does he look like?
He's OJ Simpson. I think you know his record. Could you just send somebody over here?
Okay, what is he doing there?
He just drove up again.
He just drove up over? Okay, wait a minute. What kind of car is he in?
He's in a white Bronco. But first of all, he broke the back door down to get in.
Okay, wait a minute. What's your name?
Nicole Simpson.
Okay, is he the sportscaster or whatever?
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
Wait a minute. We're sending the police. What is he doing? Is he threatening you?
I'm going nuts.
Okay, has he threatened you in any way or is he just harassing you?
You're going to hear him in a minute. He's about to come in again.
Okay, just stay on the line.
I don't want to stay on the line. He's going to beat the shit out of me.
Wait a minute, wait. Just stay on the line so we can know what's going on until the police get there, okay? Okay, Nicole?
Uh-huh.
Just a moment. Does he have any weapons?
I don't know.
Okay.
He went home, now he's back. My kids are upstairs sleeping, and I don't want anything to happen.
Okay. Has he hit you today or no?
No.
Okay, you don't need any paramedics or anything? Okay. You just want him to leave?
My door. He broke the whole back door in.
And then he left and he came back?
And he came and he practically knocked my upstairs door down, but he pounded it, and then he screamed and hollered, and I tried to get him out of the bedroom because the kids were sleeping in there.
Okay.
And then he wanted somebody's phone number, and I gave him my phone book and put my phone book down to write down the phone number that he wanted, and then he took my phone book with all my stuff in it.
What does he say?
What he always does.
Unit, your domestic violence at 30 Crescent 325 South Crescent Greenway is too high. The suspect is now entered in the shelter. And it is refusing to leave. It's code too high. Incident 4221 RD 825 children involved.
Oh, different now. I'm talking you do it fine. Now you know, shit your head, you do it fine.
Just stay on the line, okay?
I think about that.
Is he upset with something that you did?
Oh, a long time ago, it always comes back.
So, in the call, and it's awful to listen to, but you can hear the call handler say, did he beat you or is he just harassing you? He broke the door down, she said, and the children were sleeping. So she was scared that things were going to escalate, something really terrible was going to happen. She said that it's happened before, so that talks to history, and he's going to beat the shit out of her. You can hear him kicking off in the background. My goodness, that's explosive rage. And he sounds terrifying, like he's shouting the odds. And I mean, how terrifying that must have been for Nicole and for the children. And yes, children do hear things, and yes, they do witness things, even if they have their door closed. And the call handler said, stay on the line, okay? Is he upset with something you did? I mean, this is just terrible. Nicole sighs heavily and said, a long time ago, and it always comes back. So for me, there was no urgency, and the call handler minimises what Nicole's saying and then shifts the blame to Nicole through her language. Is he upset about something you did? Now, that's classic victim blaming. And the call handler knows there's a history. Nicole's told her that, and he's being abusive, and that can be heard. That's very clear. So this is really inappropriate questioning. And she can hear that it's not safe for Nicole or the children. And that's what Nicole needed to do, to get to a place of safety with the children or to get an urgent response. And the problem is each time he just was not held to account, and that's not what Nicole got. And equally, what's telling and revealing for me is that OJ Simpson did not fear the consequence of his behaviour, i.e. he knew she was on the phone and he just carried on regardless. Now that's really instructive to me, because that's evidence that can be used in cases. But when the police turn up, they just chat to OJ Simpson. And on occasion, some of them asked for his autograph. They were mesmerised by the juice and him being a celebrity. And OJ really did capitalise on that. And he invited many of the officers from LAPD to his parties. He was friends and pals with a number of them. My goodness, what a difficult situation for Nicole. And she tries to get help so many times. She's being abused and terrorised, and the police knew about it and did nothing. And what's more, they're going to parties at the house. And that's the sort of thing that domestic abusers and coercive controllers do. And all these things matter. It means that OJ Simpson was in control of the police response. And that should never be the case. It means that Nicole never stood a chance. And the message to her was, you don't matter. The message to him is, you do matter. And you can just do whatever you want. That's what he received as a message, being greenlit. And so Nicole took matters into her own hands by leaving him numerous times, trying to escape him. And he always pulled her back in. He was the archetypal charming guy, very charming. And each time she went back, the abuse would continue. And there were occasions where OJ Simpson would grab her round the throat, and that's a high risk factor to serious harm and femicide. He would grab her by the crotch in front of family and friends. And that message is, you're mine, you're my possession, you belong to me, demonstrating his power and control. And when it's hands around the neck or any part of the face, hands over the nose, around the mouth, the message is, I have control over whether you live or die. And once hands go around the neck, the perpetrator, in my experience of cases, never de-escalates. They only go the other way and increase and escalate their behaviour. So there was a very clear history of abuse. There's much more I could share with you, and I will in the extended episode for the Crime Analyst squad. But there was very clearly a power imbalance in every way. He treated Nicole absolutely horrifically. And in her pregnancy, when you're at your most vulnerable, he treated her appallingly. And what sort of man does that? He was more concerned about his external image, his image in the public, than he was about the women in his life, the significant women and children in his life. And Nicole had had enough. And she decided to finally draw the line and end the relationship. And she told her sister Tanya one night that she was doing all the work, trying to work on the relationship. And she said, but I'm dancing alone. And she had had enough. And, you know, the irony is, because when most victims are being abused, the number one question that historically has been asked, and it still is asked, is why didn't she leave? And separation, when you leave, it actually increases the risk. And that is paradoxically and ironically why some women stay, because it's not safe to leave. It's too unpredictable. Well, Nicole had been gone for 2 years. She had divorced him. And he was in another relationship with Paula Barbieri. But OJ Simpson would not leave Nicole alone. And he tried every tactic. He threatened to take the children away from her. He used them as leverage. He used them against her. He manipulated her. He coerced her. And many abusers do this, by the way. Many coercive controllers do this. He wanted to stop her from leaving and to control her. And he did it all. And if there were such a thing as a textbook profile of a domestic abuser and coercive controller, OJ Simpson was it. And a few months before she was killed, she said to her mother, I go to the gas station, he's there. I go to the Payless shoe store, he's there. I'm driving and he's behind me. I just want you to take a moment to consider how that must have felt like for Nicole. He was omnipotent and omnipresent everywhere she went. Well, that's called stalking. It's a very insidious behaviour. It's very terrifying when it happens. And he terrorised her. And she wanted to start a new life, abuse-free, without him. Of course, he's the father of her children, but she wanted to draw a line and to be able to move on and to live her life and have freedom of choice, freedom to do what she wanted. And she wanted new friends. And she told her sister this the night of the murder. She wanted him to stop, but he was fixated and obsessed with her. And this is a very dangerous place to be. And we know that the day that she was murdered, she had told OJ Simpson enough was enough. They were going to their daughter Sydney ballet recital in the day. And in fact, OJ Simpson had flown in from New York and he arrived late. And Nicole had firmly told him she did not want him sitting with her and she did not want him going to dinner with her family. They were a party of 11. She didn't want him going. But he turned up anyway, and he sat at the ballet recital and he was just glaring at Nicole, and eyewitnesses said that. And afterwards he turned up at the restaurant when Nicole had made plans to go to OJ Simpson's son's, he's called Jason's restaurant, and then she changed plans at last minute and she went to Ron Goldman's restaurant. Now, a video of that evening was entered into evidence in the criminal trial where OJ was seen kissing and hugging Nicole's family, even though she had asked him not to be there. And it was shown by the defence that he was of affable demeanour, that, he was being sociable. And the important thing for me was that he had ignored Nicole's boundaries and what she had asked. He went anyway, and then he went round each member of her family, charming them and being this affable guy. Well, that night, as I mentioned, Nicole had drawn the line and she didn't want to have anything to do with him anymore. And she said, finally, it was over. And that finality is important to highlight, because separation and finality are high risk factors for serious harm and femicide. So are stalking behaviours and coercive control and victim's fear, the victim being extremely fearful. And there were checks in those boxes. And OJ had also threatened to kill Nicole, and he said that he could get away with it because he was OJ Simpson. So again, these high risk factors are really important to attend to. This is, when there's a threat to kill and there's stalking and there's been an intimate relationship, we know that 1 in 2 of those men who make that threat will act on it. So 1 in 2, 50%. And this is despite the fact that Paula Barbieri was dating OJ for some time prior to the murders. And even she felt that OJ was obsessed with his ex-wife, Nicole. She too, she'd been out with him the night before to a black tie dinner, and she broke up with OJ Simpson that next day, the day of the murders. And that's significant. Paula Barbieri wrote a book called The Other Woman and detailed the abuse that she suffered at the hands of OJ Simpson. And although she didn't label it abuse, it was her being put down by him questioning her all the time, him accusing her of cheating, the rules and regulations that she had to adhere to. Whilst he could do whatever he wanted, he was in fact cheating on her. And so the coercive control and abuse she experienced at his hands was also horrific. The timeline here and the sequence of events, that's always what I'm very interested in. The behaviour, the victimology, the timeline, the sequence of events, the crime scene assessment. All these things are important, but the timeline here is significant because Paula and Nicole both broke up with him on the same day. And no one says no to OJ Simpson, and particularly not a woman. He would not take no for an answer. And this was a double rejection. Now, when Paula had heard that Nicole had been murdered, she rushed to see OJ and looked after him. And she said that on OJ's suicide note, the so-called suicide note, Paula said it was all about OJ. So poor me syndrome, as I call it, PMS. It was all about his fall from grace and not being loved by the public. It was not about Nicole. And of course, everyone saw the Bronco chase. And if it were anybody else, LAPD would have shut that down. A potential murderer escaping, but he received special treatment. And of course, that wasn't the first time. We know from Eric Menendez, Eric was in a cell next to OJ Simpson when he was first arrested for the murders. And OJ was being asked for his autograph. Even when he was arrested, he was getting great food and they kept his cell door open. So special treatment for the killer. But Eric said something that was quite interesting, certainly for me, and that's that OJ Simpson was upset about his career plummeting in the wake of the charges against him. And he said, "I suppose I won't be working for NBC anymore." Now this, it's so egregious, but it's really revealing. He wasn't upset about Nicole being murdered. He wasn't spouting off about finding her killer. No, his tears were for him. They were for himself. And he also never asked how Nicole died. So it's not about always what someone says or does, it's sometimes about what they don't do. And for me, as a criminal behavioural analyst, all these things are instructive and paint the picture about who OJ Simpson really was. He used charm as a key tool. Charm. He was extremely charming. And charm is a decision. It's not an innate trait, i.e. we're not born with charm. But what I do know through my work is that charm disarms. It can be used as a manipulator, and it always is with coercive controllers. He was so invested in controlling the narrative and in controlling his image, and it was so important for him to be liked by the public, and that's what he attached his value to. That's what mattered to him. And his charm, I'm convinced, played a key role in how he got away with it over and over again, of behaving as an abuser and coercive controller. And of course, the celebrity card, the celebrity sportsman card also weighed in. But his offending behaviour and his male entitlement didn't start with Nicole. So you've heard about Paula and you've heard some of what went on, of how he abused Nicole, but there were others. And I want to share with you, well, it was a tweet of somebody called Nicole Minute, who tweeted on X, formerly known as Twitter, on April the 11th. And I want to read verbatim what she said, or what she wrote at 4:32 p.m. And it was this: "I've been waiting 29 years to tell this story about OJ and his days at USC. Now that he's dead, may he burn in hell, I have a story that I signed an NDA for that is no longer valid. I was a junior at USC working in Topping Student Centre on campus in 1995. I was an administrative assistant to the president of student affairs that semester in the work-study programme. In early 1995, Robert Shapiro and Robert Kardashian, USC alumni, walked up to my desk and said that they had an appointment with my boss. I was studying to be a criminal defence lawyer with a dual major in political science and international relations, so I knew who they were. The meeting lasted about 30 minutes. After they left, I looked at my boss like, WTF? What the F was all that about? He walked me outside and we sat by the old sprawling big tree outside Topping, and my boss lit a cigarette for the first time in years and told me I had to sign an NDA because I could confirm OJ's lawyers were there for the meeting. Then he told me what the meeting was about. Before OJ could graduate from USC, the university paid off 2 families of 2 blonde white girls that he had dated and battered. They had both gone to LAPD to report it. One claimed he also sexually assaulted her in the relationship. The school had a vested interest in OJ going far in football and protected him at all costs. OJ had been in custody for 6 months and lawyers were in the discovery process for the trial, and OJ's friend Robert Kardashian, who knew OJ from also being a student at USC, thought it would be best if those stories never saw the light of day. So a large check was written, given to my boss, and they left. I'll never forget holding that check. Now, did you hear about this before now? No. That's how much power money enables. After he was acquitted, I changed my major to philosophy and psychology double major. I understood that I could harm society more than not if I pursued law. This is also why I abhor the Kardashians. They're rich thugs, nothing more. #OJ is dead. Gosh, I mean, it's not surprising, but it's so egregious and angry-making. And what did OJ's lawyers want from USC? Well, of course, they wanted to keep this quiet. They wanted to control the narrative, and they threw money at the problem, as many powerful men do, to ensure that women are silenced, and they protected a dangerous abuser. After all, OJ Simpson was a football star. As so many headlines keep reminding us, the school had an investment, and they needed to protect that investment, and that investment was him. And powerful men protecting other men, placing a huge burden as well on a 19-year-old girl to keep their secret and allow and enable OJ Simpson to hurt other women. And it begs the question for me is, how many other women were there? How many others did he harm and abuse? Who was there to protect Nicole and Ron? Who protected the 2 women that OJ Simpson dated whilst at university, and no doubt countless more? 2 women who had been battered and sexually assaulted, whose families, Minette was told, went to LAPD for help. And instead of protecting these women, USC allegedly paid off their families, allowing OJ to graduate and harm more women in the future and kill Nicole and Ron. So that part is also instructive for me. LAPD knew. They knew that he was a serial abuser of women, and they did nothing. Now, in my experience, if there's no consequence for abusive and violent behaviour, the abuser just keeps doing it. They just keep being greenlit. They have to fear a consequence to change their behaviour. And what's the message to Nicole? The message to her was, you don't matter. What's the message to those 2 USC female students? You don't matter. They went to the police for help. They went to the college for help. You don't matter. What's the message to OJ Simpson? You matter, and you can do whatever you want, and you will be backed up by the system. You will be supported, and you will be backed up by the system. Think about that, because that's what's going on. It's still going on, and that's not okay. That's what we need to change, by ensuring there's accountability and that victims' voices are heard. That's so important. And OJ Simpson's behaviour, well, it was just a classic domestic violence coercive controller profile for me. He's backed up by everybody. And we really need to make sure these serial abusers are on the same register as sex offenders, violent and sexual offenders. So important. And stalkers, they should be on that register. And we hold them to account. We hold those perpetrators to account, and we stack the deck in favour of the victim and not the perpetrator. And that's a hill I'll die on. That's about my life work. So I won't let this faux narrative about OJ Simpson's legacy promulgate, because he did do an interview that placed him at the scene that night and said that he was going there to see Nicole, to set her straight and to protect his children. And he was angry and he was rage-filled, and he did confess to it. And I'll talk about that more in the episode to the Crime Analyst squad that will go on Patreon. So do go over to Patreon, patreon.com/Crime Analyst, and join the squad. And I want to end, most importantly, thinking about Nicole and thinking about Ron and thinking about their parents and their families, and ensuring that the legacy is understood and that we honour and remember Nicole and Ron. Until next time, be curious, ask questions, and always trust your instinct.